Hi YouTube, Laura here. I'm just coming online to share a May recap video to talk about some of the highlights of my May, and in particular decks I've been working with, the novel that I read, a couple of films that I watched, and a few crystals that came into my life as well. I really enjoy the kind of end of the month, beginning of the month's time when a lot of the TarotTube channels that I watch will include a kind of recap or favorites retrospective of the prior month. I haven't done one of these before, but I figured if I like watching them and I'm interested in other folks' favorites from the month, then maybe somebody will be interested in mine. So here I am. So the way that I'm going to structure this little recap is that I'll start with what probably most are most interested in, which is the decks that I worked with for this month and enjoyed working with for this month, Tarot and Oracle. I'll talk about one each, and then I will just briefly mention a novel that I quite enjoyed that I read this month, a couple of films that I watched at home, and then a few stones that I found at the end. So first, if you haven't seen it already, I have a video a little bit from a little bit ago. Definitely a highlight of May was finding my first tarot deck. So you can view that video on my channel. This was definitely the most exciting deck to come into my life in the month of May. I still kind of can't believe that I found it, and kind of getting reacquainted has been really fun. So I won't show that deck again since I have an entire video dedicated to it, but very exciting. So I do tend to work with about a deck a month, one tarot and one oracle, and I don't hold myself to this as a kind of hard and fast rule. If I feel kind of inclined to work with something else for a particular reading, then I absolutely will. But when it comes to kind of daily-ish morning and evening readings for myself, I will generally work with one deck for the entire month. And so I did that for May, and the deck that I worked with for May, grab the box, is the Antique Anatomy Ephemera edition. And I won't do a full walkthrough or anything. There's lots of walkthroughs of this deck on YouTube. And this is a deck that was created by Claire Goodchild, who her website is called Black and the Moon, which I'll link below, and she's created a number of tarot and oracle decks as well. I have a few of her oracle decks too. There are also, I believe, a few other editions of the Antique Anatomy tarot. This is the only one that I have. So these are the backs. And I chose this deck to work with for the month just because it feels springy to me. There's a lot of floral there. And it wasn't a new deck for me. I'd had it for quite a while. I don't, when I say that I work with one deck, one tarot and one oracle a month, that does not necessarily mean that I buy a tarot and oracle deck every single month. I've certainly done lots of repeats and will continue to do so, you know, in perpetuity, I'm sure. But I was feeling like working with this one. I wanted to work with a more pip style deck for May, and so this one was the one that I had chosen, and this worked out actually really well, and something that ended up being kind of another favorite for May was that Claire, the creator of the deck at Black and the Moon, created Tarot Reconnect, which was a series of prompts on Instagram, actually. So I decided to use the deck that she created and participate in the Tarot Reconnect. I think that a lot of folks call these like Tarot Reconnect Challenge, and I'm not sure, you know, when people call these things like a challenge, I'm not sure if it's a kind of, I challenge you to use Instagram every single day for a month is kind of the implication of this. I am a profoundly uncompetitive person in all things, really, and certainly in tarot, the idea of a challenge, I don't know. It always feels strange to me to kind of use that kind of language. So prompt series will work well for me for Tarot Reconnect. So Claire had posted a beautiful booklet that she had designed outlining the prompts. I did not print the booklet. I have a black and white printer for which the toner is very expensive. So I kind of just rewrote a very functional but aesthetically unimpressive version of the workbook for myself. So for the first 22 days, they followed the 22 major arcana in order, starting with the Fool. And so the idea was that for each of those days, from May 1st to May 22nd, you would take out the major arcana card corresponding to that day. So the Fool for May 1st, the Magician for May 2nd, and so on. And then on each of those days, you would pull one or two extra cards, draw one or two extra cards from the minor arcana and kind of read them together. So the prompts that Claire provided said, we'll be reconnecting to the major arcana archetypes. I'm reading here, sorry for looking down. The minor arcana are acting as supports through this exercise to help us uncover new meanings and connections. And then she offered a few questions that you could ask once you have your major arcana card of the day and the minors that you've chosen. What elements are present? Is the numerology the same? Do these cards oppose each other? Are they compatible? Was there a time in my life when I had to use this energy? And so on. And so the way that I decided to approach the first 22 days for myself was to just pick one extra minor arcana card per day to go with each of the major arcana. And when I was drawing that minor arcana card, the question that I asked was kind of some slight variation on what do I need to know right now about my relationship to this major arcana archetype. And I got some really interesting results from this, actually, and I really enjoy kind of journaling what I had found. So just as an example, the Ten of Rods showed up 3 times for my relationships with the Magician, the Chariot, and the Wheel of Fortune. So that was my most persistent minor arcana that kept coming up. The Two of Blades came up twice for me with the Hierophant and Death. So that was interesting also. So I worked through those and I really enjoyed doing that. And then after the 22 major arcana cards were finished, so starting on May 23rd, the idea was to take May 23rd to 26th and have one each of those 4 days dedicated to one of the suits. So on the 23rd, for example, I don't remember what order I did these in, but on the day of the 23rd, look at all of the wands cards that turned up for you and kind of look at them in a group and see which ones showed up and which ones didn't, and then the same for the cups and the swords and so on. So I did those 4 as well, and that was kind of an interesting exercise to do. And then for the end of the month, 27th to 31st, was just to kind of do a spread and do a reading for yourself in any way you wanted. Those I didn't end up putting on Instagram. I don't usually put up readings I do for myself on Instagram necessarily. And I didn't feel particularly compelled to in this instance. I was doing at the end of this month a lot of kind of readings around managing anxiety and de-stressing and that. I was out of town at a convention and staying in a hotel for most of last week, which I found to be overwhelming and exhausting and stressful in all kinds of ways. So those are things that I kind of did on my own time, but I really enjoyed this Tarot Reconnect prompts anyway on Instagram to do with the Antique Anatomy Ephemera Edition Tarot, which I worked with for May. The Oracle deck that I worked with for May, I've shown in the context of a unboxing, which was the Animal Allies Oracle cards, which is a 60 card deck created by Jessica Swift. And these cards are great. I knew that we would get along, myself and this deck. I will say, and this is not a deck I'll probably do necessarily a review of since I already have that unboxing there. I ended up really not getting along with, and I figured this out very early in the month, I came to really not get along with this kind of fold out sheet of interpretations that came with the cards. I found it to be a little bit repetitive. I think in part with it being a kind of affirming deck, I found some of the animals to be too similar. There were a few meanings, and I won't get into this here in the recap video, that just like really, really, really didn't work for me. So very early on in the month, I just kind of set the sheet aside and said, this is going to be a purely intuitive and personal experience with these cards, and I loved working with them. And the art in this deck is really, really beautiful. The cardstock is thick and matte. The backs are pretty. There's lots of good colors in here. There's a lot of animals in the deck that aren't necessarily frequently included in Oracle decks, so there's a lot about this deck that I love, the Animal Allies Oracle, and I think that it will be one of the favorites. Animal and otherwise nature-themed Oracle decks are very much the favorite and are almost actually exclusively what I will work with in terms of Oracle cards. So I know I will continue to really enjoy the Animal Allies Oracle, as I did in May. In terms of books for May, I often will read more books than just one, but in May I really only read one novel, and I think that that's mostly a byproduct of it being 710 pages long. It was very long. I read Perdido Street Station by China Miéville, and it's a kind of steampunk fantasy. It's full of magic and alchemy and strange science and mystical creatures and many species living together in this city, New Crozone, which in a ways kind of felt like the city was a main character in the novel in a lot of ways. So he describes just very briefly, and he has something I really like when novels include, he has this map inside of the city, and you can kind of follow along as you read the novel. And he describes the city as a squalid city where humans, remaids, and arcane races live in perpetual fear of Parliament and its brutal militia. The air and rivers are thick with factory pollutants and the strange effluence of alchemy, and so on and so on. I won't give anything away. You can look it up if you think that this sounds like a novel that would interest you. I had in mind to read a China Miéville book for some time. I had been recommended his work a couple of times, and actually recommended a different text by him that now I can't remember what it's called. But I kind of looked up that one, and I was telling my brother this at the start of the month, and I'd kind of looked up this other book by Miéville, but I had seen that it was actually a young adult novel, and young adult is just not a genre that I usually go for, so I had never picked it up. And I told my brother this, and my brother and I have very similar reading tastes in a lot of ways. And then my brother had a copy of this book, and I mentioned this kind of whole backstory about, this book, but it's a young adult book, and my brother grabbed this one, and he said, this one isn't, there's weird shit in this book. That was my brother's kind of sell for me to read this one. And I said, well, that sounds right up my alley, then I'll take it. It was really neat. The descriptions of the city were kind of mind-boggling and incredible, and you could smell the city. It didn't smell very good, but you could really kind of sense the city as you're reading it. And I look forward to reading more by him. I know that there are 2 more novels that he's written, I think 2, that are set in the same city, but that are not sequels, like, or in any kind of plot that's connected to this one. They're completely separate, just in the same kind of universe. So I think I am going to seek those out and look at those. So for TV and film this month of May, I haven't been watching much TV, to be honest, because the weather has finally been nice. I live in kind of central Ontario. We had a very, very long winter, and now it's finally been nice enough to get outside, to do yard work, to go walking, to sit on patios. And so I've been doing that as much as possible, which means not so much television or films, really. But something that we have been quite enjoying is a series on Netflix, and it's the Remastered series, which are different kind of 1 hour-ish standalone films, I guess, like 1 hour films. And they're about kind of different musicians or songs, for example, and kind of their histories. And there's usually some kind of mystery, I guess, at the center of it, at least from the few that I've watched. There's quite a few of these remasters, actually, but we've only watched 2 so far. So first I watched one called The Devil at the Crossroads, which was all about Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson was a blues musician and guitarist who recorded in the 1930s. And he is a really interesting figure. A lot of his life and death are unknown in a lot of ways. You know, the historical record about him is very limited. And so there's a myth about Robert Johnson that in order to become the incredible talent that he was at a very, very young age, he died in his 20s, in order to become this incredible blues musician, he had sold his soul to the devil. And so the film kind of traces his life and what is known about his life and looks at that myth. And then the other one that we watched was called Remastered, The Lion's Share, which was following Rian Milan, who's a South African journalist, Afrikaner South African journalist, who had written a story about this and then is hosting this film about the song, which is now known as The Lion Sleeps Tonight, in part thanks to Disney making tons of money off of it, but is stolen, really, from a musician, Solomon Linda, who wrote the song as Mbube, and it kind of, the song went through a number of hands as it kind of eventually morphed into The Lion Sleeps Tonight that we now know. And you learn in the film that Solomon Linda really was very impoverished when he died. He did not see the monetary reward of the song being as much of a moneymaker as it was, not only for Disney, but going back like to Pete Seeger and a number of others in between. He never really got anything for it, even though it was his recording that really was stolen and became this very widely known and widely loved song. His descendants also got nothing. So the Remastered episode traces attempts to rectify this, and some of the legal cases that were pursued on behalf of Solomon Linda's daughters, adult daughters. And it was a really complicated one. I have a lot of feelings about it. It will stay with me a while. I can't summarize everything that was in there. But it was really, kind of affecting, and I thought it was well done. I learned a lot, and I know that there's quite a lot of other of these remastered series to have a look at. I know there's one about Jam Master Jay and the murder of Jam Master Jay. I'm interested in watching that one. I think there's about 5 or 6 others. So Remastered was what I watched this month. And to finish off the May favorites, I'd mentioned I was in a hotel that was in Toronto. And in Toronto, there's a great shop, a crystal shop called Geologic. I'll link their website. So I went to Geologic there last week and had a look around, and you know, I like going in when I see a crystal shop for sure. So I just got a few little goodies. I got a small tumbled rose quartz, but that one is actually, it's over on the counter. My rose quartz is in my water bottle, so I won't go get that one. I did also get this Shungite pyramid, small one. I've been reading a book about crystal grids, which I don't know a ton about, but I'm interested in learning about. I plan to do a review video of the book about crystal grids, which I have lots of very, very mixed feelings about, if I'm quite honest. But in learning about different kind of shapes of crystals that could go in a crystal grid, the pyramid is a popular one, and I really like them aesthetically. So it's my first crystal pyramid actually that I've ever had in my home, and it's this Shungite. And I also found this stone called sardonyx, so it's a type of onyx. So it's a chalcedony, I guess. And I liked this one, especially this back piece, because it kind of reminds me of something that I really, really like a lot, which is paisley. So I picked this sardonyx, and I'm interested in learning how to wire wrap and make things like pendants, and I thought that this longer shape with the flat on each side would be a good shape to make a pendant with. So those are what I found, and that was my favorites for May. So coming up for June, just briefly, obviously I'll talk about these a month from now a little bit more, but for June I'm really looking forward to working with the Illuminated Earth Oracle, which I have an unboxing of as an earlier video. I haven't had this deck for too long, but I'm really looking forward to working with it. It's beautiful, and as a tarot deck, I'm using a deck that I've had for quite some time, which is the Margarete Petersen tarot. And this deck actually, it's really light because this is actually just the box. The deck is upstairs. But I would like to do a review of this deck when I'm done working with it, because this is a deck that I've had a very complicated relationship with. I admired it for so long, but was terrified of it because I was very in the Rider-Waite-Smith box, and I had no idea, you know, it's like this beautiful deck of paintings, and what would I do with this? And eventually I felt comfortable enough to bring this deck into my life, thinking, okay, I'll be able to get to know this deck. It has a fairly lengthy little book that comes with the deck, but then actually a number of things in the book that comes inside this deck really bothered me, and really continue to bother me, actually. There's a lot about the book that I don't like, to be quite blunt. There's quite a lot about the book that I do like, but there's a few things that I really, really, really don't like. And so I kind of came back and forth to this deck because I knew that were I to work with it, I would kind of have to do it without the book in a lot of ways, which is not what I had kind of planned or what I had thought when I had initially bought the deck. So now I'm feeling really good about it, and I'm really looking forward to working with it. I'm curious to see how we will get on. I worked with the deck this morning for my new moon in Gemini reading, and that was really great. So I'm looking forward to working with the Margarete Petersen this month, and it does look really beautiful beside the Illuminated Earth Oracle, so I'm really looking forward to that. In terms of films and television, I have no idea what I will be watching in June. I guess we'll have to see at the end of the month. For reading, I am finally reading How Long Till Black Future Month by N.K. Jemisin. which is a collection of short stories. N.K. Jemisin is probably my favorite author right now. She is incredible. I have read a duology and 2 trilogies of novels that she has written already, and this is her first collection of short stories, though I've read a few of them before because they've been published elsewhere. I'm really, really excited for this book, so I cannot wait to talk about that at the end of this month. So that's my first ever recap video, and that's my recap for May 2019. I look forward to looking at everyone else's May recaps, and we'll see how things are going a month from now. Thanks for watching if you got this far, and have a great day. Bye.